What's up, guys? I'm losing my shit here. Another brutal day with a couple of losses that I don't think should have happened. Evansville, they started out way behind because Illinois State hit like their first at least 7 3-pointers or something like that, which is absolutely ridiculous. That was like the whole reason why they had that huge margin, that huge lead early on. And then Evansville wound up still getting back into the game completely. I think they had the lead with not too much time left in the game. They were winning outright. Then the game flipped the other way again. They were still within the spread with a couple minutes left. And then, of course, it wound up coming down to them being down by enough that they had to intentionally foul. So then that's why they wound up losing by 7. But that was a game where, at least in the end, it probably could have gone either way. But I think Evansville, they were in position to cover for a lot of the late portion of that game, I would say. So that is really unfortunate. And then the Pittsburgh Penguins one was even worse. The Penguins, they didn't trail until the final, whatever it was, like several minutes of the game, probably. They were winning 1-0 in the middle of the third period. And one thing I actually forgot was that was also Jaromir Jagr night, because I think they retired his jersey number and he was there. So it was a big celebration of Jagr, who was on my Bruins for a little bit as well. Guy, it seemed like he played forever. It seemed like he was like 60 and still playing in the NHL. I don't know how old he is now, but it's crazy. So there was that added motivation on top of it. The game was close, but Pittsburgh kind of dominated the game statistically. They were the way more physical team. They had way more hits. They had like a huge face-off percentage, like 60-something% of face-offs they won. They had like a couple fewer shots, but that doesn't matter as much. But Pittsburgh really handled them statistically, handled the Kings, and then they're up 1-0 with, 7 minutes to go, less than that. They gave up the tying goal, and then they had a power play near the end, and they lost the game on a shorthanded goal. It's so disgusting. Like that Pittsburgh one, that absolutely should have been a winner. It's unbelievable. This keeps happening to me. So many games that I think I'm right on, and they play out like in a way that they should be a win for me, falling on the wrong side. It's just all so ridiculous. And then, Florida Atlantic, fuck them, basically. They put themselves in an absolutely gigantic hole that was impossible for them to climb out of. And they still almost did it. They got to within 1 point after they were down 25, I think, still in the second half. Maybe they came all the way back. That was a game, South Florida, they were hitting an unreasonable amount of threes early, too. Florida Atlantic, obviously the better team, came all the way back, and then I was just hoping tie it, send it into overtime, and then anything can happen, and they might be able to actually win by 5 or whatever in overtime. That would have been insane, but of course that didn't happen. But they were within 1 at the very end there. They had to foul another once or twice there at the end. Oh, my God. The Pittsburgh one, really, really difficult to take, and Evansville, I think, should have gotten there as well. We move on to today. There's a small college basketball card. I would say that I lean a little bit to Virginia Tech. I'll just talk about a couple of bigger games. Virginia Tech's a big game, rivalry game. Virginia Tech up from 1.5 to 3 as a home favorite. I don't think the public is really going to want to be on Virginia Tech here because they have the way uglier record. This is maybe I should just jump in on this because it's another one of those unranked teams favored against a ranked team. That's the case here with Virginia Tech against Virginia, and it gets boosted a little bit because Virginia Tech, I think, is kind of playing they play the little brother most of the time to Virginia here, and even though they're coming off a game against North Carolina, that game wasn't close. So, of course, they're going to be focused with their rival, Virginia, coming in. And Virginia already beat them at home by 8, although, Virginia covered that spread, too. That was only a 4.5 spread. It's interesting. KenPom has these teams only separated by, a few ranking spots and has this game around, a 3. I think this is a good one, actually. I think I'll take Virginia Tech here. So I'll be on 2 college basketball plays. The unranked team being a favorite against a ranked team has been a really, really good money maker, which is crazy. Virginia Tech -3, I guess we can do here. The unranked team being a favorite against a ranked team hosting them has been hitting 67% this year, and I have not been on that many of them because I tend to like the situation to be in line with it. I kind of like the power ratings to be in line with it. Power ratings are kind of right in line with it. KenPom, I think, has this at around a 3, but the schedule maybe a little. the schedule spot, I think, may be a little bit better for North Carolina as well. Virginia Tech's coming off a much more difficult physical game where they played Wake Forest pretty close the whole way. Wake Forest, a pretty good team, and Wake Forest kind of on the tournament bubble, trying to battle their way into the tournament. Virginia has close to secured a spot in the tournament at this point. I mean, they're like a name team. I think they're going to get into the tournament. They're in the rankings. I don't think there's much they can do at this point to not get in. Virginia Tech, I think, knows they're not going to be in. So this is one of their biggest remaining games that they're going to play this year, really. They get to host their rival in Virginia, their bigger brother in state, Virginia, who already beat them once this year. And Virginia, I believe Virginia has another big game up next, too. Let me see. Yeah, they have North Carolina up next. So are they going to overlook Virginia Tech a little bit in this spot? I would say maybe that's possible. Virginia has not been as good on the road in conference play for sure. They lost to Notre Dame by 22 in conference. That's really bad. Lost by 16 at NC State. Lost by 19 at Wake Forest. Won by 9 at Georgia Tech. Not impressive, really, either. And won by 17 at Louisville, who's the worst team in the conference. Not impressive. Won by 1 at Clemson and won by 4 at Florida State. So Virginia hasn't been great on the road here. Virginia Tech coming in here, like I said, kind of more at the bottom of the conference. You got to weigh home court a little bit heavily here just because that's the way it is in college basketball. So I'll do it. I think Virginia, they might get caught here. This game actually is kind of between two bigger games, really, against Wake Forest, who's actually one of the better teams in the conference, and North Carolina up next, having already beaten Virginia Tech once. So it's a second meeting, and it's one of those unranked teams favored over a ranked team type of spot where the ranking where the rankings are and where the records are actually are not indicative of how good these teams actually are. The ACC, last couple of years, have been pretty down, man, where the best teams in the ACC aren't really that good, although North Carolina is pretty good this year. But other than that, like Ken Palm's just got both of these teams, I think, somewhere in like the 40s and 50s, something like that. So really not great teams. Virginia being kind of overrated because of their name recognition, and they still got Tony Bennett there and whatever, and they do play pretty good defense still, but they're a team that also struggles to score like pretty mightily at times. They play like a very, very slow tempo as well. Virginia Tech plays a faster tempo than that. Virginia Tech might be able to successfully speed this game up at home. Virginia Tech is the much better scoring team here, although also the much worse defensive team. But if they're able to control the pace here and speed this up a little bit, it might be a negative for Virginia here. So this is definitely more of a contrasting styles here too. We have a faster, better scoring team hosting the game in Virginia Tech against a slower paced, very defensive team that struggles to score in Virginia. So interesting, but we'll actually do it. We'll be on Virginia Tech here. So, and then the other game I'm going to be on is actually in the Oh, no, I thought it was in the afternoon slate, but it's a 6 p.m. game. This line is shooting way, way up, man. It opened Colgate 6.5, and it continues to go up through the 8.5 now into the 9 range. I was able to lay 8.5 on this. I wouldn't want to lay that much more than that probably, although once you get past the 7, it's getting a little dicey, but I don't know how many shops really open at 6.5 though, because Action Network says that it opened at 8.5, so I don't know. Ken Palm, I think, has this line around 8 or maybe even 7, but this is a spot that I like. The line keeps moving up on Colgate. Colgate is, I mean, obviously they have a target on their back though, because they dominate the Patriot League. They've dominated the Patriot League for years now, and they've just been kind of unstoppable in the Patriot League, winning it all year. But I think that this is one game where Colgate is actually really going to show up for it. I think there are major, major reasons to show up for this game at Lafayette. Lafayette's second in the conference, although they're 3 games behind Colgate in the conference. So Colgate pretty much already has the conference wrapped up. So you might say, well, why are they going to be focused? Because then isn't Colgate going to be overrated now because they're obviously the best team in the conference? They have the better record. Aren't they going to be like a public team? Aren't the public going to do it? I don't think so, because I think the public is going to look at this and say, Colgate's laying 8.5 on the road at Lafayette, who's the second best team in the conference, and Lafayette already beat them this year. Lafayette beat them at Lafayette, and that was Colgate's only conference loss this year, and it was at home against Lafayette, where Colgate was a 13.5-point favorite in that game. So yeah, the 8.5 is a bit much here. The 13.5 kind of indicates that maybe this line should be about 7.5 or so. But I would say still the 8.5, I think, is still all right here. And I think Colgate's going to be really motivated because it's turns it into this road reversal revenge angle where they lost to Lafayette at home. That's their only loss in the conference this year at home to Lafayette. Colgate's going to remember that, man, and they're going to want to win this game, I would have to say. Get a little bit of revenge here. This is the only team that beat them. They're going to want to complete the sweep of the conference, basically, at least by beating every team in the conference. They don't want to get season swept here. Lafayette, sure, they'll be motivated because they have the best team in the conference coming into their house, but I just think that Colgate is going to be too much for them. And it's going to look a little misleading because I think some of the recreational bettors might think this is a huge number to be catching at home, where Lafayette's the second best team in the conference and the only team that beat Colgate in the conference. But again, I look at it the other way, and I think it's going to motivate Colgate heavily. I played a similar game not too long ago with Morehead State, although Morehead State almost didn't get there, but I still think that was the right play, where Morehead was playing against the one team that had beaten them in the conference up to that point. And that seemed to be a pretty heavy motivator. I think this is going to be an even bigger motivator, though, because the road reversal revenge angle comes into play. And yeah, even though Colgate is not the road underdog here, and that angle works better when you have a road underdog, Colgate did lose to Lafayette at home. So they're certainly going to remember that, and they're going to want to show up here for this one, I would imagine. So I like Colgate for those reasons. Laying the points there. So we're going to have 4 plays today. Going to the NHL. I was close to wanting to play against, who was it? A couple of these teams I think are in bad spots, and I didn't quite want to do it with them. I think Vancouver is in a bad spot a little bit. I think they're kind of in a sandwich-ish spot going into Minnesota because they just played Winnipeg, but they did lose the game 4-2, and they have Colorado up next. So a little bit of a sandwich there. Colorado is tomorrow as well, so I would lean a little bit against Vancouver, but the market does look like it's on Vancouver, pushing them up from -120 to -123. It was 63% of the cash, 56% of the tickets. So I'm going to stay off that one, but I don't think it's a great spot for Vancouver there, whereas Minnesota, they're coming off a kind of ugly loss in a return home. They played 2 games on the road, didn't really travel that far, but came home and lost to the Sabres, which is pretty ugly. So I think they're going to show up focused. I mean, it's Vancouver coming into their house too, so I think they're certainly going to be focused there. So I don't like the spot for Vancouver really in that game. So that's one thing that I would point out. There was one other team returning from a road trip, I think, that I didn't want to actually play against, but who is that? I don't even remember now. I'm looking through the whole schedule here just to try to get this all settled here. I thought there was, but maybe there wasn't. Was it Calgary? No. But Calgary's playing Winnipeg, so I think they're going to show focus, and they're playing against Winnipeg. I don't even know who it was. It's no, not even St. Louis. St. Louis already returned home from their road trip too. They're playing with a little bit of revenge, I think, against Toronto, or Toronto's got revenge against them. I don't know what it is. Yeah, Blues have the revenge against Toronto because Toronto beat them when the Blues went to Toronto. Anyway, the games that I'm actually playing in the NHL, play number 1 is going to be to go against the Seattle Kraken. They're returning home from a road trip. They just took a long road trip, 5-game road trip out east. They lost the first 3 actually, it started on the West Coast at San Jose, and then they went out east for 4 games. They lost the first 3, won the last 2 of them at the Islanders in a shootout, and then beat Boston 4-1. So I think that's why they're not in a good spot here, even though they've actually had 3 days off now to get their home affairs in order. So when you return home, having those extra days off actually kind of mitigates the return home distractions a little bit, because you get to take your you get to put your home affairs away like before you get to play the game. But I think it still kind of a distraction because you still are dealing with home life a little bit there. It might carry over a little bit, but I think the reason why this is a bad spot, not just because of the home distraction angle, which I think might be a little bit less so just because they've had extra days off, but the extra days off are now in the midst of a 2-game win streak, and they're coming off beating Boston. So I think having extra days off might hurt your momentum there when you've had 2 wins in a row. You don't want to really have extra days off there. You want to keep playing and continue that momentum. So that might break their momentum a little bit. And they might just be sitting on that Boston win and just like getting a little bit overconfident, like thinking very highly of themselves. We just went into Boston and beat them. They've been sitting on that. They're returning home to those press clippings and whatever. Look how awesome we are. They got Detroit coming in, who's kind of a mediocre team, I would say, and they have Vancouver up next in 3 days. So I think that makes it a sandwich spot on top of it being a return home spot. It's a letdown spot. It might be a little bit of a momentum breaker with the extra days off, and it's a sandwich spot with a look ahead to Vancouver here. So I don't like anything about the spot for Seattle in this one. So I'm going to be on the Detroit Red Wings in this one. And for the Red Wings, they just beat the Flames 5-0. So typically I don't want to be playing a team that's coming off a big win like that. But I think that game at least Calgary's kind of a mediocre team at least, but that at least broke some losing momentum that Detroit had. Detroit had lost the prior 2 games, but they were to Edmonton and Vancouver, so you can't really blame them for losing to 2 good teams, although Edmonton smoked them 8-4, but that was off of a game where they beat Vancouver in overtime. So Detroit has been playing pretty competitively in all these games. They've played a lot of good teams recently, so having lost the first 2 games on the road trip, they've had 1 day off between each of these games, so that maybe helps a little bit. I think the fact that they only have 1 day off as opposed to Seattle getting 3 days off maybe even gives us a little bit of more value on the Detroit line here because Detroit is going to be seen as the less rested team here, but they're the team that actually has less travel because they're just going from Calgary to Seattle now with 1 day off. And that Calgary win was fairly easy, and I think that is a nice kind of a momentum builder there. Detroit actually really got outshot in that game and out-hit physically, but I think it was probably because Calgary probably started kind of like losing their shit because they were getting blown out the whole time, even though statistically, they outplayed Detroit a bit. Detroit won the face-off percentage by a lot, and Calgary was having to swim upstream the whole game. So looking at the market in this game, Seattle has moved way, way up from minus 110 to minus 138, so I don't like that. They've shot way up, but Detroit has 56% of the tickets and 61% of the cash, so it does look like the cash discrepancy is on them. So I don't know about the line having moved that far up like that, but I guess that is the case right now. It looks like Seattle, from what I see on action, it looks like they only opened up minus 128, and they've gone up just a little bit from that. So I don't know. So the line has moved up a little bit, but whatever. I guess we'll take the extra value on Detroit at plus 118 or whatever we can get here. So that's going to be that one. And then the final play is going to be, this is going to be a weird one. Sometimes I will jump in on a puck line, but it's very, very rare that I jump in on one of these bigger puck lines. And this is going to be a play against the Carolina Hurricanes, where they're down from minus 450 to minus 422 on the money line, which is insane. They have 88% of tickets, 99% of the cash. I don't think I buy that cash discrepancy, really. The line is moving down on them because I think there is going to probably be some professional action coming in against the Carolina Hurricanes, I would imagine. Thinking that line is just so big. And they are playing the Chicago Blackhawks, who are one of the worst teams in hockey, and Carolina's a very, very good team, but still, Carolina, look at the spot they're in, dude. This is an awful spot for them. They're returning home from a 3-game road trip that took them to Dallas, Arizona, Vegas. They lost to Dallas, beat Arizona in a blowout, and then they beat Vegas to finish the road trip. Now they return home from Vegas. They only have 1 day off. And who do they have up next after they play Chicago? In 3 days, they face Florida, who's one of their biggest, enemies, one of their biggest foes in the Eastern Conference. Everybody knows how good Florida is. They're the Eastern Conference champions from last year. And they have Dallas up after that, which is not only a game against a good Dallas team, but a little bit of quick revenge because they lost the first game of that road trip to Dallas back on the 13th. So those are bigger games up next. This is a total sandwich spot, and it's a return home spot with only 1 day off. So I think it's going to be a distracted spot for Carolina because they have all the home distractions coming into play, and they have bigger games surrounding this game, coming off the big win over Vegas, only 1 day off, and they're going to be facing Florida and Dallas coming up after this. I don't think they're going to have focus on Chicago at all, man. Chicago has been playing pretty poorly, but I like the spot that Chicago is in. I like this as a momentum spot for Chicago because Chicago hadn't won since before the All-Star break, I think. Or no, they won one game after the All-Star break, excuse me. They lost most of their games besides that, though, and they were on a 3-game losing streak coming into their prior game against who did they play last? Or excuse me, no, I'm wrong. Excuse me. Scratch all that. I was looking way too far back there. Excuse me. Yeah, they had not won since the All-Star break. That is correct. Excuse me. They had not won a game since then. So coming out of the All-Star break, yeah, they'd lost every game. They're on a huge losing streak going back to before the All-Star break. They lost 8 straight games. And then what did they do 2 days ago? They finally won in their final home game that they had in the homestand. They haven't been on the road yet since the All-Star break. So they played at home, lost every game at home since the All-Star break, 4 games, I believe, and then finally won against Ottawa. But if you look at those games they played at home before Ottawa, coming out of the All-Star break, their worst loss was to Minnesota at home. Then they lost to the Rangers, Vancouver, Pittsburgh, playing some pretty decent teams in that stretch. Although I'm not going to try to argue that Chicago's any good. They're not really. But in their final home game, they were able to beat Ottawa. So I think that's going to be a momentum starter for them, or at least break that negative momentum, because you got to be feeling pretty like not very confident when you're losing that many games. You haven't won since before the All-Star break. They hadn't won in like a month, basically, almost. You finally win a game that kind of gets that monkey off your back again. All right, we've won a game. That's good. That gives you a little bit of confidence, and then you get to take that out on the road for this one game. I think you're going to have your full focus on Carolina. You're going to want to play a good game against a good Carolina team, carrying some of that positive momentum, knowing that you can win a hockey game on the road. I like all that for Chicago here. You can get Chicago. You can play the plus 1.5 puck line and get like plus 140 or maybe even plus 145, which is a pretty decent price there. But I'm actually going to play this on the plus 2.5 puck line here to only come within 2.5 goals here. You can lay minus 125 on it right now, it looks like, which is getting a little bit up there in the price. But I think that's a decent enough price. If it's still close to like the minus 120, I still think it's fine to actually grab the additional goal here just to get that a little bit extra goal there. Like the extra goal is worth quite a bit. So I think it is worth it to play it at around minus 120. So we're going to take Chicago, sprinkle a little bit on the money line at plus 350 or whatever as well, because that's a nice, when you're playing any hockey underdog, you're saying there's a decent chance that they could actually win the game outright. So sprinkle a little bit on the money line, but grab the 2.5 goals, and then the main part of the bet will cash as long as they come within 2 goals in this game, which I think is doable. I mean, the spot is bad for Carolina, so grabbing 2.5 goals with Chicago there on the puck line, paying a little bit of a price for it, but I think it's worth it to get the extra goal. You don't get you don't get a puck line of 2.5 goals very often in hockey. It's a little bit rare. This is going to be one of the biggest favorites that you'll see in hockey this year, really, in the 400s range. You've seen it some of the games this year, and you get one of the better teams in hockey against one of the worst. It shows up every once in a while, but this is one of them. We'll do that. So that's going to do it, man. 4 plays today on this Monday where there isn't that much of a card. NBA is still on the All-Star break for like a week now, I think. So, and it's going to be tough. The NBA, I'm probably not going to be jumping right back in on like the first day, or the lines are already out for the games for the NBA for the first like couple of days. I'm probably not going to be jumping in on much NBA until the NBA gets back into session for a couple of days. So we'll see about that. But today the plays in college basketball are Colgate minus 8.5, Virginia Tech minus 3. In hockey, Detroit Red Wings plus 118 and the Chicago Blackhawks plus 2.5 on the puck line at minus 120 or so. That's going to minus 125, whatever I said. That's going to do it for me, man. Off today for President's Day, Tyrant's Day, fun day, man. Let's actually start getting back on the winning day, because I do like these. I like these situations that I'm playing, man. It is just unbelievable to me that so many of these are just not hitting, and so many of them seem like they should hit, and they just fall on the wrong side of it. So let's get back with it, man. Peace.